Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and I was asked a couple of weeks ago by a viewer if I would do a video on tips on precise piecing. So that's what we're going to do today. And if you have any tips that you'd like to offer, I hope you will put those in the comments below so that we can all see them and hopefully we can all learn from them. Okay, the first place that I think to start to improve the accuracy of your piecing is with your cutting. So one thing you want to do is to make sure that your rotary cutter and your mat and all the tools that you are using have the same measurement on it. So you want your rulers and your mat to match up, and all you have to do is to lay your rulers on top of your mat and line up the lines on it, and just check them and make sure they are the same. And they should be. It shouldn't matter what brand you are using. Like I'm using an OmniGrid ruler, but I have a Dritz mat, and they all match up. And when you do this, just get your head right on top of the ruler so that you can see. If you look at it from an angle, it may look like it's off, but that's just because of the angle that you were looking at it. So you can switch brands, so it shouldn't really matter what brand you've got. And I think nowadays everything is really precise, and things shouldn't be kind of warped out of true measurement. This is a different brand. This is an Easy Quilting ruler, and I use this one a lot, and I do the same thing. Just line all of my lines up on the ruler with the lines on the mat, and everything lines up, so I know my piecing is going to be accurate. Another thing is on your rotary cutters, make sure you have a sharp blade in them. You'll get more accurate cuts that way, and it doesn't matter what kind of rotary cutter you use. I have two different kinds. I have these ergonomic ones here, and then I have the old-fashioned ones. This is the first rotary cutter I ever had, so this one is very old. This is an Olfa. This is another Olfa. It's a newer one. It has a thicker handle on it, so it's an easier grip. And then I have the little more precise ones, and these are Olfas also, and I have two of them, and they're the same, just one's older than the other. And then this is a Fiskars, and they're both Fiskars. This one, is really dirty. I haven't used it in a long time. I need to change the blade on that one. In fact, right now all of my blades need to be changed. So if you haven't, if you're new to quilting and you haven't changed your blade on your rotary cutter in a while, you might want to go out and try that. Especially if you're working on a big project and you've done a lot of cutting, then your blade probably needs to be changed. The next thing is when you're cutting your fabric, you want to make sure that it is pressed and ready to go. And this one I just gave it a quick press. And you can see I've got a selvage edge over here. I want to cut that off. I'm going to cut my fabric this direction. Instead of selvage to selvage, I want to cut that selvage off. And this is a scrap left over from a quilt backing, and I just want to get this ready to cut into strips to use in another quilt for piecing some blocks. So I always have this is double folded over, so you can see here I have one fold up here and a fold there, and I've pressed it, and I'm going to cut off the selvage. So I've got the selvages matched up the best I can, but you can see this came from a wide fabric, and wide fabrics tend to warp off the grain. So if I lined up every single one of these selvages, the grain would be off. So I'm going to just cut off all of this to make it even. And so this is my shortest piece, so I want to make sure I stay behind that, and I'm going to line up my fabric here, and here the fabric is the fabric bows out, and that's from the selvage, which is another good reason to cut off your selvages. Okay, back here the selvage is bowed, so I just want to cut that off, and then if I need to straighten it up anymore, I can. So I've got my rotary blade, it's a 45 millimeter. And there we go. Don't forget to close your blade. And I'll give that a second there to kind of relax. And then I want to check again and make sure that it is squared up. And it's still a little bit off, so I'm going to go ahead and trim a little bit more. There. That one I could tell just by eyeballing that it was off. This one looks a lot better, so I'm going to double check again. Okay, now that one is square, so now I know that it's all squared up and ready to go. On this edge, you know, this where all the raw edges come together, and they're not even at all, but I will be cutting from this edge. So when you're cutting, now I've got this trimmed, I'm going to flip it over, and I'll be cutting from there. Another thing you can do to keep them from shifting when you're doing long pieces, like up here, you notice me moving my hand. That's because I want to keep my hand parallel with the rotary blade. If I kept my hand down here and pushed, the chances are it would be pushing my ruler too to the side, and I don't want to do that. Another thing that helps is having grippers on the back, and you can get these sandpaper grippers at your local quilt shop or places that sell fabric like Joann's or Michael's or Fabricland or any place like that. So you want to, you know, you might want to try those out and see if that will help. The biggest help though is keeping your hand flat, and then when you get up to that point, walk your hand up, and then it's not as likely to shift on you. So that should get you nice accurate piecing. Another thing you can do to help improve your accuracy is to mark your rulers on the size that you want to cut, and you can buy these static type tapes at your local quilt shop or any place that sells fabric. Usually will have them, or you can use painter's tape and just mark where you want your cut to be, especially if you're using a mark that's a little bit off. If you're not doing them like full inches, like if you're doing 2 1/4 inches, you can take a piece of this tape, and I'm just going to cut it with my snips, and say I'm cutting fabric for binding, and you can put this tape right along the 2 1/4 inch mark, and you can put it in several different places. You don't have to do it all the way up your ruler, but put it in you know, a couple of places, like at the top and the bottom of your ruler, or you can put it in, you know, 3 or 4 different places. Just use, you know, these pieces are, I don't know, between 1 1/2 and 2 inches long. Just put them on the 2 1/4 inch mark, and then that way when I have my fabric out here, I can see those lines, and it gets me right to the measurement that I want. And I'm still going to use the markings on the ruler to make sure I have everything lined up precisely, but that helps cut down on time. You don't have to search for that measurement so much. It's right there. I can see it, and I can just line everything up there along that line just pretty quickly. So that's another thing that helps. And the package that I bought came in 3 different colors, and they're neon colors. There's orange, yellow, and pink. So you can use whatever color is going to work best for you. The next area is accurate piecing at the sewing machine. I highly recommend getting a 1/4 inch presser foot, and you want to test that out to make sure that gives you the exact 1/4 inch measurement that you're looking for. This foot works really well. I don't have any issues with it. Another thing that will help is, you know, when you're sewing, the thread does take up some space in your seam, and one way to make your piecing accurate is to use a thinner thread. So what I usually use is a 50 weight thread, and I have 50 weight thread that I use on my long arm. This is Superior Threads So Fine line, and I like this one because it has enough tooth on it that the thread does not like to unravel itself. I use that. You can use thinner weight threads. There's up to 100 weight thread that you can use, which is really thin. It's like a silk thread if you like to go that route. Here, I'll just go ahead and sew these 2 triangles together for you. And if you like to use leaders and enders, you do that. You can also use go ahead and take that out. Another tip would be to use a finer needle in your machine. You're using a finer thread, so you don't need a heavy needle in there. Here I went ahead and I sewed these 2 triangles together, and you know, it has a nice seam. Here's the finish. You know, just check and make sure your tension is good. If your tension is too tight and it's puckering up your fabric, it's also going to distort it. So it's going to distort your piecing, and it's going to cause you problems when you try to piece things together. So I want to show you a little bit about pressing. Things that can help with accurate piecing is good pressing, and one thing that can help is to press your seams flat before you press them open. So I'm just going to go ahead and hold my iron on that just for a few seconds, lift it up, roll the fabric out of the way, and then let the weight of the fabric help open that up, and that works really good. And I've got a nice straight seam here. It's pressed flat. It works really well. Another thing is to trim off your dog ears here, because those are going to add bulk to your piecing and to your quilt, and added bulk is not going to help you with accurate piecing. It just gets in the way, and it kind of tends to make your piecing shift around. So you want to get rid of all of those points. Now I'm going to go ahead and press a couple pieces. These I've already trimmed off because I was using them in a different project, and these were kind of some leftover pieces, but I'm going to go ahead and press these and sew them together and show you a little bit about matching your seams. Okay, I'm going to sew these together to make a 1/4 square triangle, and of course there are other ways to do this, but these are just the pieces I happen to have right now. And of course I want to match these seams, so I have pressed the fabrics all towards the dark. And what that allows me to do is to nest these seams. So these seams will interlock like here, just like that. And that keeps them from shifting, because they're gonna, each seam is gonna press against each other, and they're gonna help prevent themselves from shifting, so that when I sew that, those seams should line up like that. Hopefully they should not come out like this, which is what you want to avoid. So press your seams in opposite directions. The rule of thumb is to press towards your dark fabrics, but if you've been watching my Stash Buster series, you know that there are times when I press towards the light in order to get my seams to do this when they line up and give me a better result. So we'll go ahead and sew this seam. Okay, so we're going to follow the same tips as before. I've got a 40 weight or a 50 weight thread in. I have the needle that's appropriate for the size of the thread, and I've got my seams butted up against each other. Another thing you can do that may help, I'm going to show you with this one, is I'm going to butt my seams together, get them all nested in there nice, and I make sure that they nest all the way down the seam. That helps a lot too if you can do that. And you know, you're shifting this around, taking it from your hands to your sewing machine. So what you can do is to pin it. And I like to pin diagonally. I can do this better up here. I like to pin diagonally, so I'm getting both seams. I'm getting that seam in the back and the seam in the front, like that. See, in the front and the back. And that makes it easier for me to sew it, because the hopping or the presser foot will come up against here, and I can pull this needle out real easy before it gets to the pin. Okay, so go ahead and sew this seam, and you can feel those seams as you're stitching. You can feel that they're all nested together. Now I'm just using a 2.5 stitch length. Slowing down will help. This is all on a biased edge, so you know I have to be careful not to stretch it out of shape. So I'm just letting the machine pull it through. I'm not shoving it through, and I'm not tugging on it. I'm letting the machine pull it through. And just keeping the edge of the fabric up against the edge of my presser foot. And find my scissors. And then we can trim this off. Okay. And then we have a nice point there when we get that open. So we're ready to press again, so now we have to take that to the pressing surface and get that pressed open. Okay, so we're going to press the seam the way it was sewn and then press it open. And there we have it. And then we have a nice point there. And I'm going to trim off my dog ears. And now this little piece of patchwork is ready to put in a quilt. Okay, when you need to match points, I have this piece here that has a point on it, and I want to match that up to this piece where there is a seam. To find exactly 1/4 inch in deep where that seam is, I'm going to use a ruler and line that up with the edge of the seam to get my 1/4 inch. And I can mark it. I'm going to use a pencil today, but you might want to use something that isn't going to show, because this will show on your fabric when you get done sewing. Now the pencil point has width to it, so you can see here it's the width of my point, my lead. Now when I put my pin in, I want to go to this side because that is where the ruler ended, so that is where the 1/4 inch is. This is going to add a little bit extra, and it's not going to be correct, so just kind of remember that. Now for my piecing here, let me get in a little closer here. I'm going to lay this down so maybe it'll help a little bit. Okay, the lines of stitching cross. You can see here. Whoops. They cross here, and that forms that point. And where those two cross, I want to stitch just to the outside of those. So on the seam side, not this side, but on the seam side. But I'm going to place my pin right where those two cross, and it should come out at the point on this side. So you can see that. Put that pin in right at the point where they cross, and there you go. Now I want to line that up with this seam, and I'm going just to the outside of where I drew that line. Right here. The line is here. I'm going to go just right on the outside of that towards the seam. And those two should line up pretty well now. So we're going to line everything up, pin it together, and then I need to meet these two seams together. So we're going to butt those in together and pin those. And now we're ready to go to the machine and sew those. Okay, so we're ready to sew these together. So I'm lining up my raw edges, and I'm going to start with my needle down in the fabric. And just take your time. And if you have a needle positioner, you could stop with your needle down when you need to. And I'm getting close to this seam, so I'm going to take the pin out. And then we're going to go on to the point. And I can see where those two cross, and I need to take my pin out at this point because they're close. And just sew off the edge. Okay, let's see how this worked. I'm going to trim off my threads as I go too. Okay, so this is what we have. So right here where that point is, you can see that? Well, let's press that and take a closer look at it. Okay, so I'm going to press it flat, and then you can press it open. You can press it either direction you want. I like to press away from the point. I think it makes the point show a little better. And here we go. So you can see the pencil mark here. So that's why I said you might want to use something besides a pencil, because that will not wash out. That will stay in there. So use a air-soluble pen or water-soluble pen or chalk if you need to do that. So don't use the pencil. This is just a sample piece, so I don't care. But you know, if you're doing this in your quilt, you're going to not like little pencil marks showing up. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, and hopefully there were a couple of tips in here that you can use. And don't forget, if you have any other tips for us, don't forget to write them in the comments below, and we can all read them and learn something new. Don't forget to click the like button if you like this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you are all safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.